Welcome everyone to Tapes on Trial, where we dissect media and tell you if it deserves a reaping or not. I'm your favorite undead judge, the Reaper of the Tapes. Today I'm here to answer a special question. Does this anime deserve the label of horror? The anime in question is known as School Days. The source material, an adult video game, was produced by a company known as Overflow, which spawned this title. Numerous sequels, as well as this anime, which was produced by TNK Studio. Probably now most known for High School DxD, but back in the day it was known for School Days, oddly enough. Currently the distribution rights belong to Discotek Media, so more people can actually check this anime out if they choose to. In a past life I may have covered this, but I believe it's worth another look. Now let's get into it. This is School... Well, looks like it's already started. This is School Days. The story starts with a boy named Makoto Ito riding the train as he comes across a girl who rides the train with him named Kotonoha Katsura. She's the stereotypical shy character that most main characters fall for, which makes the series seem predictable at first. We then get introduced to another character known as Sekai Sayonji, who sits next to Makoto in class, and if you already can't guess, she's a love interest. After padding out the runtime of the first episode by explaining the meaning of her name, she decides to set up Makoto with Kotonoha because she cares more at first about Makoto's feelings than her own, but that slowly changes when Makoto seems to only want one thing. Yes, good old lovemaking. Also yes, I know I skipped almost 4 episodes, but that's because almost nothing really happens other than Makoto meeting Kotonoha's little sister, who doesn't really excel the plot. Makoto and Sekai are an interesting dynamic because you kinda buy that they're an item. But as you can tell, Makoto is a piece of filth for being a cheater. Which yes, it will be a consistent theme with the show. Makoto makes Kotonoha believe that nothing is wrong and that they'll be dancing together at the traditional school dance. This dance is meant to symbolize an undying love for whoever dances during the event. Makoto instead chooses to go with Sekai, which isn't a surprise. But what is a surprise is that Kotonoha gets taken advantage of by Makoto's friend Taisuke. And why is this important? Well, it leads Kotonoha to spiral downwards in terms of her character, as her personality is shattered along with her innocence. The problem I have with this is that it's only included for shock value. It only gets brought up once more, and nothing comes of it. Taisuke never goes to jail, Makoto never confronts him, nothing. He gets away with his shitty deed, and that kind of thing should never happen. Kotonoha just kinda wipes this from her memory, too, as far as the viewers know, which makes everything utterly pointless. This leads me to Setsuna. Setsuna is a character that was included from the game that had her entire character arc destroyed. She had very little backstory and almost no impact overall on the main plot. She's only used as a device to show that Sekai was supposed to be somewhat manipulative early on, and Setsuna did most of the things she did on her own accord. Then you find out that she too had a crush on Makoto as well, which comes rather late as the writers use it as a way to write her out of the show for some reason. I know she was supposed to leave for France in the visual novel, but some things could have been changed, like the ending for example, which we'll talk about later, but let's talk about Setsuna a little more. Her and Makoto get freaky in exchange for Sekai's happiness. Yes, Setsuna is giving herself to Makoto so he'll stop cheating on Sekai, which had been a thing after he slept with not only a childhood friend of his, but literally almost every female character that he interacted with. Is this off the rails enough yet? Because we still got a bit more left for you. Sekai finds out Makoto is in fact a cheater and later on develops morning sickness apparently while grieving over her friend moving away and not telling her. Actually, it's kinda hard to really say if it was that or about her sleeping with Makoto without Sekai's knowledge. Either way, it makes Sekai depressed. Sekai goes to school and tells Makoto that her period's late, which makes everyone's heads turn. But it doesn't stop Makoto from cheating, as he was previously having sex in what I believe to be the science lab and then attempts to continue calling his fun buddies. Makoto eventually seems to work out his issues with Sekai, as she prepares a dinner at his apartment and he goes out for another piece of ass. He runs into Kotonoha, where she references one of the game endings, and he realizes the error of his way. He apologizes, and she snaps back into a healthy state of mind somehow, bringing her home after once again arguing with Sekai. Now, this is where I'll be spoiling the ending of School Days, so please, if you really don't want to know, then maybe you should turn the video off now. Sekai returns to Makoto's apartment to find Makoto at home with Kotonoha, slapping her in the process. But Kotonoha berates Sekai, blaming her for all the issues. And honestly, I feel Makoto is surely in the wrong here, as it's indicated by the fact that even though he was with Sekai, he still cheated beyond her, which shows he values women as a whole. Sekai's character kinda shatters from this point. Later on, Makoto sends a text to Sekai implying to get rid of the baby, which Sekai's not happy with, prompting a final meetup at his apartment. Sekai decides to make tea and launches her desperate final plan, which unfortunately isn't the Norman Bates plan of whacking Makoto over the head with a shovel after poisoning the tea. Instead, she goes with a more easy way. The traditional knife stab montage. By now I can only assume people know about this scene. It's been almost everywhere, but it holds so much power over the viewer because it kinda comes out of left field. The visual novel's strong point, as well as its selling point, was its 21 different endings. While the remastered had a few more added, this was the only one not to be included. This is exclusive to the anime, while another counterpart having a different ending being the manga. You can feel Sekai's pain with every stab, and you can also feel a bit of happiness with Makoto getting his just desserts. Sekai manages to escape, only to be lured to the school by Kotonoha, who confronts Sekai once more after she found Makoto murdered in his home. It's one thing to confront Sekai, but Kotonoha went the extra mile, cutting Makoto's head off, sticking it in a bag just to show Sekai, and then cutting her wide open just to see if she had a baby inside. But the worst thing about this is Kotonoha mentioning that there was no baby. It's like one of those 30-second horror stories, but the worst thing about it is if Kotonoha just lost her mind in believing her own lies and not accepting that she killed not only Sekai, but the baby as well, or she really wasn't pregnant at all, which makes Sekai look less sympathetic. I like to just believe Kotonoha was psychotic, because we end with Kotonoha holding Makoto's head on a boat, which partially prompted the classic meme, "nice boat," and that was School Days. And honestly, after doing this summary, I kinda prefer to remember it this way rather than watching through it again. But now's the part we've all been waiting for. Does this series deserve a reaping and be sent to the afterlife? Or is this series going to get a pass? Well, first we've got to answer the question I asked earlier. Does this deserve to be called horror? I honestly don't think it deserves to be called horror, but let's go into detail. The story is generic. Nothing horrifying happens except for the ending. And I don't think this should qualify anything as horror. Just because something has a surprise death and lots of blood doesn't make it horror. In my opinion, they replaced proper storytelling with too much fanservice. And yes, this even had its own swimsuit episode. But even that was sadly tied to Makoto's character development. This story is more one-dimensional than the story of Degrassi, and that expressed similar issues with teenagers, much like this series. But School Days' focus is too much on sexual interactions, rather than the development of other characters. While yes, the graphic imagery is up there with the likes of Higurashi, it falls flat in telling a satisfying story by comparison. I will note that even the OVAs refused to back up the plot, but instead went for the magical girl route. I will again bring up the ending, which was different than any of the 21 that we got from the game. It could have gone for the cliche harem ending, but it didn't, which surprised everyone in the end. So, before I continue, I want to hand this review off to a friend of mine who can help cover this portion a little bit better than I can. So please, let me introduce the abridged archiver himself, Pzykosiz.
Thank you to the Reaper for featuring me. My content is a bit different from reviews, but it features anime nonetheless. Regardless, let's talk about the impact that School Days has made on the anime industry. While the reception to this anime may be mixed, it seems that it's still touching on the soul of the anime industry today. Like mentioned before, if it were not for School Days making a buzz for its ending, TNK may not have ended up picking up High School DxD, and subsequently such series as Ikitosen, Senru Kagura, and probably most infamously, Redo of Hero. But because of its sleazy story and design School Days had, it seemed fitting to everyone that TNK had the rights to do that series after. Before we touch on anime references, we first have to talk about the Kyoto incidents. Now, for those of you unaware, around mid-September of 2007, a 16-year-old girl was arrested for murdering her father in Kyoto, Japan with an axe. The girl went as far as apparently donning a black dress so she could mourn him properly. Various stations pulled the final episode of School Days, as well as episode 12 of Higurashi Kai during this time. which led to stock footage that featured a boat, which is now simply known as the nice boat meme, which gets referenced whenever School Days is mentioned in conversation. Shortly after this incident, another incident will occur, this time in Hyogo, Japan, though it is unknown if these events were linked or if this is an attempt at copycatting the previous incident. Either way, because of incidents like these, the finale of School Days had to be censored, replacing the red colour of blood with what people would describe as motor oil. Despite the event, School Days still managed to inspire others and be referenced among the community. As early as Hellgirl's second season with its episode 21, which featured a Makoto rejecting a pregnant woman, to most recently, Pop Team Epic making a nice boat joke. There have even been some successful abridged parody series made, as well as a fan dub of the series that reignited the love for the series, which makes it somewhat shocking that no company has gone so far as to dub the series officially. Overall, it did make a legacy for itself, whether it be being the Tommy Wiseau's The Room of Anime, or for the events that surrounded it. I'll pass it back here. Thanks for having me on, Reaper.
Pleasure's all mine. If people want to see any of the projects from Pzykosiz, the links will be in the description. Now let's talk about the casting characters. First, there's everyone's most hated character, Makoto Ito, who's poorly written in this adaptation. Makoto goes from being immature, inexperienced, and indecisive to being a cold, promiscuous idiot. And then the writers try to have the fans root for him one last time, when in reality I don't think anyone was supposed to root for him. An issue I have with this character is simple. They don't write the backstory for any of their characters until the last second. The closest character I can compare Makoto to is the character of Craig Manning from Degrassi. Yes, once again using Degrassi to compare this series to. Craig was written into Degrassi half-assed, not giving you too much backstory until he was suddenly important, but you get more of a feeling for his character. And he had his own love life drama between two girls, much like Makoto, but the difference is you get to see Craig's hobbies and kind of relate to him, unlike Makoto, who never really shows much interest in anything except other women. Another good example of character assassination was that Makoto was the big brother. Yeah, I bet you couldn't guess that because of how poor he acted, but I guess it was so unimportant that they left it out. Like how they could have left out Kotonoha's sister Kokoro. Which brings us to the Katsura sisters, Kotonoha and Kokoro. The reason I'm grouping them together is simply because Kokoro was just mentioned and she doesn't have a big part, so why not? Kotonoha, as mentioned, is a shy girl who doesn't usually take the initiative, but towards the end she finally does, which oddly shows character growth out of all of these characters. She's the only one who really seemed to have learned anything from this event, which I guess is needed because she is the only one of the three main characters left alive by the end of the story. Kokoro is a supportive little sister who doesn't get to shine, but when she does, she gets her own OVA, which is a bit odd. Either way, props to her. The two don't really fight, so it shows what kind of bond they have. For Sekai, you feel sorry for her because she kinda gets roped into the story. She just wanted the guy she loved to love her back, and while yes, she did let Makoto use her, she thought it was true love, and that wasn't love at all. It was almost like a grooming or a mental abuse situation, but maybe I'm giving Makoto a little too much credit because of his stupidity. Now let's look at the secondary characters. Firstly, Setsuna. As I mentioned before, Setsuna was a character who played more of a role in the games, going as far as to get her own event in the remaster of School Days known as School Days HQ. She'd later get her own game called Summer Days, which even that got a remaster because the original ran poorly on Windows Vista. That remaster was known as Shiny Days. Now why am I telling you this? Well, it's simple. She was a main character! That's right, the twatty bitch in this anime got her own game where she was a main love interest. And oh yeah, that's one thing I hate about her character here. She's unlikable and underdeveloped both metaphorically and literally. Overflow representative Mathers Numakichi has gone on record to state that Setsuna was at the top of his list of characters when it came to favorites, so why would he let them butcher any form of her character? That's something we'll never know. As for Taisuke, well, his character is irredeemable in this story. It's a shame I have to keep bringing him up, but hey, every main character has to have a shit friend to make them look good, right? But again, it's another example of a character whose development was cut from the anime for no reason. I could list off all the characters and give my opinions, but let's be real. They're all underdeveloped and not worth the detailing, unfortunately. Even you, Hikari, you still try to look like a Sailor Moon character. I will bring up one thing. That is that Taisuke and Hikari were supposed to have a romance, but that makes the rape scene even worse for Taisuke's character. Another issue that I'll bring up, which a lot of people tend to forget, most of the characters in the story are related in some way, which makes this an incest story. Just look up the family tree based on School Days, as it links back to a franchise called Snow Radish Vacation. You'll be disappointed in Overflow even more. The voice cast did a good job at conveying emotion for the characters, but because I'm not really fluent in Japanese, I unfortunately cannot give a full review of the Japanese dub. All I can say is that they did a job that makes me believe in what they were doing. The direction was overall good for what they were given, and they knocked it out of the park. For the music, I think that was one of the highlights of the show. The opening theme is Innocent Blue, performed by Device High, while the endings are varied, and unfortunately the only credits for the music I can find are Yoshiyuki Ito. But overall, I want to praise everyone for their work with the music because that is a true highlight for me. One of the things that makes the ending work is the song Kanashimi no Mukoi, also known as To the Other Side of Sorrow by Kaneko Ito, which is one of the only things to return from the visual novel endings, but here it achieves a cult-like status, which is impressive. Overall, the tone is set because of the song. And finally, I talk about the animation, which is another high point for this anime. While everything but the music lacks so far, the animation is pretty good too, especially for being made in 2007. Yes, I know this was a joint production by TNK, Avex, Lantis, Marvelous, Pony Canyon, and Jinin Studio. That is a mouthful to recite, so you don't need to get on my case about it. They did a great job with this collaboration, so props to them. They made this anime actually look good enough so that it wouldn't hurt my eyes, and the colors were great and didn't seem blinding at all. I would say it was one of the more decent looking anime of its time. And the verdict is an unfortunate reaping and sent to the afterlife. I'd be lying if I didn't call myself a masochist for saying I enjoy this anime, but if I enjoy it so much, why do I think it deserves a reaping? Well, the characters and story don't do it for me. While the music's good and the animation is pretty at times, going as far to have a decent ending, the problem stems again from the characters and the story. If things were fleshed out a bit better, I could most likely give this a better recommendation. Some stories are built around their endings, and if this story was built around its ending, then why weren't we eased into it a bit better? The ending is unpredictable for first-time viewers, which I do like, but after that, where's the rewatch value? It just isn't there. But as I mentioned earlier, the licensing has been renewed, which means you, the viewers, can be the judge of your own fates. Give it a watch and feel free to discuss in the comments. Thank you all for watching. I've been your undead judge, the Reaper of the Tapes, and you've been watching Tapes on Trial. We'll see you next time. Hey you. If you liked this video, make sure to like, comment, favorite, subscribe, and share this video around. If that's not enough, why not go watch another from the channel in the meantime? Don't be too afraid.